Hey guys, Simon from BluffTheSpot here, and today I'm going to be sharing with you another video. This time I'm going to be talking about some common misconceptions that I hear and see from students and other poker players about pre-flop ranges. Pre-flop is, a pretty complicated part of the game and something that a lot of people think is pretty solved. And because of this and the fact that we are able to run bunker sims and, get to what looks like optimal outputs, a lot of people think that pre-flop play is, kind of already done, follow the charts, that's all you need to know. But I'm going to be sharing with you some of the misconceptions that I see, and what you really should be doing and how people are often leaving a lot of money on the table by, basically just copying pre-flop charts. So the first thing to address is what exactly are these pre-flop ranges? And you can see here I've brought up a range on the left, and this is like what a 6 max button opening range looks like. These models are based on bunker, where the solver plays itself into a billion iterations, and it kind of comes up with an optimal frequency that it wants to open. It works out the best hands to do it with, and what you end up with in sims is you end up with a lot of borderline hands, a lot of hands that can either fold, it can either open, and what you see is these are the ones highlighted with the mixed frequencies, like the 0.5s, the 0.3s. These are all hands that the solver's basically going, hey, this is 0 EV. It doesn't care whether we fold or whether we raise, but what it does matter care about is actually the frequency, and making sure the frequency of its overall range is correct. Now, the biggest problem that I see is a lot of people go, okay, this is what a solution looks like for pre-flop. Cool, I get it. I can't go wrong by following it. This is the best thing that I've got available. And they basically just go ahead and copy this regardless of what the table they're on. Now, the problem is that they're not playing on tables where there's 5 other GTO robots behind them playing, these ranges. Quite often on the poker table, what you're going to want is recreational players on the table, and dynamics are going to be different even between the regulars, and no one's really still playing perfect pre-flop, even if they are trying to copy the charts to the best of their ability. So why should you not play and exactly copy the chart here? Well, the reason is that these hands, these zero EV mixed hands, these aren't actually hands that are 0 EV in practice. You're not playing in a bunker sim. You're playing in real life with real people who make real mistakes. So what I often advise is for winning people and people that win in their games more than 4 to 5 big blinds, or if you've got really weak players behind you, like if you're on the button and there's really big recreational in the small blind or the big blind, quite often these hands that are 0 EV versus a solver by a solver are actually going to be highly profitable opens, particularly if you have an edge post-flop. And that's the big thing. If you don't have an edge post-flop or you're a break-even regular due to rake, it might actually not make sense to open these hands. They're probably actually minus EV in practice, and you shouldn't be opening them at all. But if you are a winning reg or you have reason to open these hands, why not? These hands aren't going to be, only making money for you 30% of the time, 50% of the time. That's ridiculous. These hands either make money for you or they don't. And I think it's the biggest thing that people don't understand when they're thinking about EV and pre-flop ranges and combos is, is this hand actually making me money or not? And quite often what I see people default into is, I don't know whether it makes me money or not. Solver does this 25% of the time, and they just blindly copy the solver and leave lots of money on the table. Now, one of the common counter arguments I hear towards this is, won't someone playing a perfectly GTO strategy be able to naturally exploit you if you're playing an exploitative strategy? So, for example, let's say I was playing in my games and I decided, okay, this is what a bunker sim looks like. This is what the optimal open looks like. I have an edge. I win in my games by 5 to 10 big blinds. I can open all of these pure. And I just go ahead and I just go, cool, I can just open wider. I might even say that I can open wider than this. I might, there might be fish in the blinds and I might be able to open these. But let's assume there's just regulars and we have an edge on the regs per se. Now, we're opening now, another 3 or 4% wider. Now, the thing is that someone that is playing a perfectly GTO strategy, what actually it means is all these hands are actually indifferent to a perfect GTO strategy. They're not actually going to exploit you if you play exactly the hands that you're meant to play, and then, you play the extra ones and you don't play the mixed frequencies correctly. Because Preflop is kind of like, it's actually pretty simple to look at. You either make money with hands preflop or you don't. And it's not whether that you're going to get to the flop with your range too weak if you play things too many. It's actually almost like a river decision. It's either something is a profitable open or it's not. And what you actually see, and if we run sims for like, river spots, what you'll actually see is in a spot on the river where you have bluff catches and someone is bluffing at the perfect frequency, like, the solver-based bluffing frequency. It actually doesn't matter in terms of EV-wise whether you call all of your bluff catches or none of your bluff catches, because they're all bluff catches. Like, they're all actually, so neutral that they don't actually care. And this is the same thing with preflop. When someone is playing a perfectly balanced 3-bet strategy behind you, they're not actually punishing you for playing too many hands. You're actually going to still be able to defend appropriately. What's going to happen is you're going to be able to open wider, and because you're playing more percentage hands that are profitable play, you'll actually increase your edge. What it actually requires is someone to counter exploit you preflop for you to actually lose money. And the actual answer to do this is quite unintuitive. It requires people to 3-bet far more aggressively than they would in a solver. And it's really, really hard for people to actually pick up on these couple of percent VPIPs in each spot. We're not talking about opening your button opening range from 45 to 70%. We're talking 3 or 4%. And these are the little differences that you can make in your games to get a bit of a further edge. Now, this doesn't just apply to open raising. Now, we've just talked about an example where we open from the button, but the same thing applies in 3-bet pots. So this doesn't just apply to, single raise pots. This also applies to basically any spot where the decision is between open or raise and fold. Now, in decisions where it's between raise and call, there it can make a ton of sense to use your RNG. But the biggest thing is that the mistake that I see is that students too often rely on RNGs because they don't know whether a decision is profitable or not. And again, this is a spot this range here is kind of what it looks like for like a small blind 3-betting range versus a button. Now, what you'll see is, again, we're going to see lots and lots of hands that either do it a tiny percent of the time, like say 6 suited, that only does it 2% of the time. But the fact that it does it 2% of the time or 99% of the time doesn't actually make a difference. The solver's saying that it's a 0 EV 3-bet. So if you have any reason that it could be profitable, this button's a slightly weaker player, there's like a fish in the big blind. Maybe just the fact that you'll beat your pool and you know that you have an edge post-flop. What you can then do is this 15% 3-betting range can get really, really wide really quickly, because what's going to happen is you're going to be able to play all of these hands at pure frequencies. And what we're going to see is that our 3-betting percentage went up 5%. Now, if someone was playing a perfectly balanced 4-betting range, and it's actually based on how population plays, is most people don't over 4-bet. It's very, very hard to over 4-bet. People actually tend to under 4-bet in position. Is that you're not going to get punished for this. You're going to be able to over-realize equity. And being able to over-realize equity because the pool under 4-bets, and due to the fact that, if you've got any reason that you're going to be profitable post-flop, this is you've now expanded your range by an extra 33%. And these are all hands that should be making money. These hands aren't, hands that, make money sometimes, and if you do it a little bit too much, you're going to get punished for it. You're just actually allowing yourself to be able to play more hands that are profitable more of the time. And this is just a small thing. These aren't massive ages we're talking about, but when you play hundreds of thousands of poker hands a year, this starts to become a really big difference. And these are the things that I quite see. Is I see that most regulars that I see, a lot of my students, they have pretty standard pre-flop kind of stats. They kind of open 24% of the time, and they have raised 20% of the time, and their 3-bets are 8 to 9%. And this is kind of all in line with what Monka would be doing. But this isn't actually how it works in practice, because in practice there should be recreationals at the table. You should never be opening tighter than what Monka says. You should only be opening wider, because you're only looking for reasons to open wider. It's never not profitable versus a reg, and it's only going to be more profitable if there's recreationals involved. So you should be having a wider VPIP and a wider PFR, particularly if you are already have a decent edge on the pool. This then compounds into wider 3-betting, because all of a sudden the way that we approach spots and the way that we think about hands and EV actually means that we're not actually thinking about trying to replicate perfect frequencies pre-flop. What we're actually trying to do is maximize in our spots that we can get in and maximize our edge in those. And what you'll start to see is that if you start to apply these things in game, what your actual VPIP should look like if you're playing only 6 maxes, it should be around the 30 to 32%. Your PFR should be around like the 26% range, and you'll see your 3-bet percentage get up to 12 to 15%. And these numbers sound really, really high. And again, if you do play in known pools, this is something that you maybe have to be a little bit careful of a reg or two exploiting, but this is only going to happen at 500, 1K and higher. Any regular playing like 200 and below is not going to be able to make the necessary pre-flop adjustments against you. And if you play in anonymous pools, there is absolutely no reason at all why you should be following perfect GTO ranges, because no one's ever going to know what kind of frequencies you're doing. So you can use that anonymity to your favor. You can use the fact that regs aren't actually going to be able to exploit you well enough to your favor, and the fact that you should have an edge post-flop to your favor. And hopefully this kind of helps you guys change the way that you think about, pre-flop sims and how that you're actually meant to use them. These sims are models that are meant to be used to help you guide your decision process, help you realize what it kind of looks like to play perfect poker. But these aren't prescriptive things that you should just be going, okay, I see this and I'm going to perfectly use it in my game. You should be understanding what it says, what it means when it says something is mixing. Something mixing doesn't mean that you have to follow it exactly, but it means it's a 0 EV decision, and you should be making a decision based on your table about whether that is profitable to you to play or not. Hopefully this helps you guys in your own games. Let me know if this has been helpful below, and until next time, cheers.